All right, so are you ready for this? A deep dive into the story of the RMS Titanic.
Ooh, yeah.
We're going to try to unpack why this unsinkable ship met such a tragic end,
Right.
drawing from that episode of American History Tellers you shared with me.
Yes.
We all know the basics of the story,
Sure.
but we're going to go a little bit beyond the surface.
Yes.
It's the early 20th century, a time of fierce competition in transatlantic travel.
Yeah, fierce competition indeed.
And White Star Line is determined to build the biggest, most luxurious ship ever.
Right.
But was the Titanic's fate sealed from the start?
That's a great question. And I think what's often overlooked
Yeah.
is that the Titanic story is more than just a shipwreck.
Okay.
It's a cautionary tale about ambition, hubris, and the limits of technology in the face of nature.
Right.
So we're going to examine not just what happened,
Yeah.
but why certain decisions were made.
Okay.
And how seemingly minor details had a ripple effect, leading to that fateful night.
I think I'm particularly interested in the unsinkable myth. How did that take hold so strongly?
Yeah.
Was it just marketing hype, or did people genuinely believe it?
Well, it was a combination of factors.
Okay.
The Titanic was indeed a marvel of engineering for its time. Like you said, the double-layered steel hull, the 16 watertight compartments.
Right.
Those features weren't just for show.
Right.
They were designed to make the ship incredibly resilient.
Okay.
But that confidence, combined with the sheer scale and luxury of the Titanic,
Yeah.
created this sense of invincibility that, in hindsight,
Yeah.
seems almost naive.
So we've got this technologically advanced ship.
Yeah.
But before we get into the events leading up to the sinking,
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious about something.
Yeah.
The Titanic's sister ship, the Olympic, had a pretty significant collision with a Navy cruiser before the Titanic even set sail.
Right.
Was that incident investigated?
It was.
And did it raise any concerns about the Titanic's design?
So you're right to bring that up.
Okay.
The Olympics collision with the HMS Hawk was a major incident. The Hawk was practically sucked into the Olympic side
Wow.
due to the powerful suction created by the Olympic's massive propellers.
Oh, wow.
It did raise concerns,
Right.
and there were calls for design modifications. However, those changes would have been costly and time-consuming.
Right.
And ultimately, they weren't implemented.
It makes you wonder if they had taken the time to address those potential design flaws
Yeah.
after the Olympic incident. Could it have changed the Titanic's fate?
Yeah, that's a question that's been debated by historians for years.
Right.
Some argue that those modifications might have made the Titanic more resistant to the damage caused by the iceberg. Others believe that the damage was so extensive
Right.
that even with the design changes, the outcome would have been similar.
Yeah.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
I think that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like unpacking all those layers, all the what ifs.
Exactly.
So let's talk about this race for transatlantic dominance.
Sure.
You mentioned ambition.
Yeah.
What was driving White Star Line to build such a colossal ship?
Well, picture this.
Okay.
It's the early 1900s.
Yep.
Immigration is booming. Demand for transatlantic travel is skyrocketing.
Okay.
White Star Line, under the leadership of Bruce Ismay, wanted to outdo their rival Cunard Line, which was known for its speed.
Okay.
But White Star decided to focus on luxury and size,
Okay.
aiming to create a ship that was not only fast, but also the most opulent and impressive vessel afloat.
So basically a floating palace.
Yes, exactly.
That would also get you across the Atlantic pretty quickly.
Exactly, a floating palace that could get you there quickly.
But that level of luxury and
Yeah,
size
yeah.
must have come at a pretty staggering cost, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The Titanic and its sister ship, the Olympic, each cost an astronomical $7.5 million to build.
Wow.
A mind-boggling sum for the time.
Yeah, no kidding.
This financial commitment really fueled the unsinkable narrative.
Okay.
It was in their best interest to promote the idea that this ship, their massive investment,
Right.
was the pinnacle of safety and engineering.
It's almost as if they couldn't afford for it to be anything less than perfect.
Exactly.
So they've got the design, they poured millions of dollars into it.
Yeah.
Now comes the construction phase.
Right.
What was that like?
Imagine the Harland and Wolff shipyard in Belfast,
Okay.
a bustling hive of activity, over 15,000 workers.
Wow.
The clang of hammers, the hiss of welding torches.
That was so loud.
Oh, incredibly loud.
Yeah.
Building a ship of this magnitude was unprecedented.
Yeah.
It was a testament to human ingenuity and sheer manpower. And when it was finally launched, the Titanic was 883 feet long.
Wow.
The largest moving object ever created at that time.
It must have been awe-inspiring to witness something that massive being built.
I can only imagine. Yeah. I mean, just to see it.
But even with all those advanced safety features,
Yeah.
you mentioned a coal bunker fire.
Right.
Did that fire impact the sea trials at all?
Right.
Or was it something they felt they could manage?
Now, this is where things get intriguing.
Okay.
The coal bunker fire likely ignited during or after the sea trials.
Okay.
Is a detail that's often overlooked. While coal fires weren't uncommon on ships of that era,
Right.
this one adds a layer of complexity.
Yeah.
Captain Edward Smith, a seasoned veteran,
Yeah.
was under immense pressure to stick to the schedule.
Okay.
Remember, the Titanic's maiden voyage was a highly anticipated event,
Yeah.
and delays would have been costly and embarrassing.
So the pressure to maintain the image of this unsinkable ship might have led them to just downplay the potential risks of that fire.
Exactly.
Oh.
It's easy to judge in hindsight, but imagine being in Captain Smith's position.
Right.
He had to weigh the potential dangers of a contained coal fire against the immense pressure to deliver on the promise of the Titanic.
Right.
And add another layer to this.
Okay.
The sea trials themselves were a success.
Oh, wow.
The Titanic performed flawlessly in its maneuvers and speed tests, further reinforcing the belief in its invincibility.
So we've got a successful sea trial,
Yes.
a coal fire they believe they have under control,
Right?
and a ship that's been declared the epitome of safety. It's understandable why people would buy into the unsinkable myth.
Yeah, makes sense.
But before we get into that fateful night,
Okay.
let's step on board for a moment
Sure.
and kind of explore what life was like on the Titanic.
Okay.
I mean, the ship was famous for its luxury,
Right.
but I'm guessing the experience varied greatly depending on which class you were traveling in.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The Titanic wasn't just a ship. It was a microcosm of society,
Okay.
reflecting the rigid class divisions of the early 20th century. First-class passengers enjoyed unparalleled opulence.
Right.
A grand staircase, a swimming pool, a gymnasium, even Turkish baths.
Turkish bath?
Yes.
Wow.
Imagine stepping into the first-class dining saloon.
Okay.
Ornate decor, live music, a menu boasting dishes like oysters, salmon, and roast duckling.
That sounds incredible.
Oh, it was incredible. It was a
Okay.
world of extravagance designed to cater to the elite.
Sounds more like a 5-star hotel than a ship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was really like a floating palace.
But what about the experience for those traveling in second and third class?
Sure.
Was it just basic accommodations?
Right.
Or were there any elements of luxury for them as well?
Well, not as lavish as first class.
Yeah.
Second class accommodations were still quite comfortable for the time.
Okay.
Passengers had private cabins, a library,
Mm-hmm.
and a decent dining saloon.
Okay.
One second-class passenger even wrote in her diary about the joy of having hot water in her cabin,
Oh, wow.
something that was a novelty back then.
Yeah, that's true.
Not common.
Yeah.
Not common at all.
It's funny to think about those everyday details that we take for granted now,
Yeah,
but were considered luxuries back then.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like hot water.
What about third class? Were they completely excluded from any sense of luxury?
Third-class accommodations were certainly more basic,
Yeah.
with shared cabins and communal dining areas.
Okay.
However, even for those passengers, the Titanic represented a significant step up from the cramped conditions of steerage on earlier ships.
Right.
For many immigrants, seeing a ship of this grandeur, even from the third-class decks, must have been an awe-inspiring experience.
It's a reminder that the Titanic wasn't just a luxury liner.
Right.
It was a vessel carrying hopes and dreams
Absolutely.
for a better life.
Mm.
But even amidst this grandeur,
Yeah.
there were stark reminders of social divisions, right?
You're...
You mentioned locked gates separating the classes.
Yes, the physical separation of classes was very deliberate.
Wow.
There were locked gates preventing third-class passengers from accessing the upper decks. Yes.
Wow.
And even the printed passenger list excluded third-class names,
Oh, wow.
almost as if they were considered less important.
It's a stark illustration of the societal norms of the time,
It is.
even in the face of a shared journey
Yeah.
across the Atlantic. It makes you think about how those social divisions
Right.
might have played out in the events to come.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The rigid class structure on board the Titanic will play a significant role
Okay.
as we unpack the events of that fateful night.
Okay.
But before we delve into the sinking,
Yeah.
there's one more incident that I find particularly unnerving.
Okay.
As the Titanic left Southampton,
Mm-hmm.
it had a near collision with another ship called the New York.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I've never even heard that.
It's often overshadowed by the sinking itself,
Mm-hmm.
but it foreshadows the immense power of the Titanic
Oh.
and the potential consequences of human error.
Even as passengers reveled in the luxury,
Yes.
a sense of unease would soon grip the Titanic.
Right.
And I'm curious to hear more about this near collision and what it reveals about the forces at play.
Sure.
Oh.
So imagine this.
Okay.
The Titanic, this massive vessel,
Mm-hmm.
is slowly pulling away from the dock in Southampton.
Right.
The New York, a much smaller ship, is moored nearby.
Okay.
As the Titanic's propellers start churning,
Mm-hmm.
they create an incredibly powerful suction effect.
Wow.
This suction pulls the New York towards the Titanic,
Oh, my God.
almost like a magnetic force.
Wow. It must have been terrifying for those on both ships.
It was a very close call.
Yeah.
Quick thinking by the harbor pilots and the sheer luck of a tugboat intervention prevented a disaster.
Wow, that's lucky.
Yeah, very lucky. But
Yeah.
for those who witnessed it,
Yeah.
this near collision served as a chilling reminder of the immense power of the Titanic and the potential consequences of miscalculation.
It's almost as if this incident was a warning, a glimpse of the forces that could easily overwhelm
Right.
even the most advanced technology,
Mhm.
if not handled with extreme care.
Precisely.
Oh.
And as we move forward in our deep dive, we'll see how this theme of human judgment,
Okay.
both in the design and the operation of the ship,
Mm-hmm.
plays a crucial role in the events that unfold.
Okay, so next time we're going to pick up with those ice warnings.
Yes.
Okay, I'm excited.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Last time we left off with that near collision in Southampton,
Right.
a chilling foreshadowing of the forces at play.
Yes.
Now the Titanic is sailing towards America, this unsinkable ship,
Right.
carrying hopes and anxieties, I'm sure, across the vast Atlantic.
Yeah.
But amidst the luxury and the grandeur,
Mm-hmm.
there's another detail we can't ignore.
Yeah.
Those ice warnings.
Yeah.
What I find unsettling is just how many warnings they received.
Right.
It wasn't just one or two.
Yeah.
It was a series of messages from other ships,
Mm-hmm.
all indicating the presence of ice in the Titanic's path.
You're right.
Yeah.
The ice warnings are a crucial element in this story. And I think they really highlight a critical factor: human error.
Okay.
It wasn't just about receiving the messages. It was about how those messages were interpreted,
Right.
prioritized,
Right,
and
right.
communicated within the ship's hierarchy.
It's like a chain reaction almost.
Yes.
Of miscommunications and missed opportunities.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the Californian,
Right.
the ship that was just a few miles away.
Yeah.
When the Titanic struck the iceberg,
Mm-hmm.
they saw the Titanic's distress rockets,
Right.
but they mistook them for celebratory fireworks.
Right. They thought they were just part of the festivities.
If only they'd been listening to their wireless.
Yeah.
If only their operator hadn't gone off duty.
It's a haunting what if that's been debated for over a century.
Yeah.
The Californians' proximity and their failure to respond quickly
Right.
really adds another layer of tragedy to the Titanic story. It
Absolutely.
really underscores the importance of clear communication, especially in a time when wireless technology was still relatively new
Right.
and not standardized.
Speaking of wireless,
Yeah,
I mean, this new technology played such a pivotal role
it did.
in both sending out the distress calls
Mm-hmm.
and in the communication breakdowns
Right.
leading up to the sinking.
Yeah.
For our listener who may not be as familiar
Sure.
with the technology of the time,
Yeah.
can you explain how wireless communication worked back then?
Absolutely. So wireless telegraphy, or radio as we know it today,
Mm-hmm.
was a revolutionary technology in the early 1900s.
Okay.
It allowed ships to communicate with each other.
Yeah.
And with land-based stations using Morse code
Okay.
to send messages through the airwaves.
So it wasn't like picking up a telephone.
No, not at all.
Right.
It was much more rudimentary.
Yeah.
On the Titanic, the wireless operators played a crucial role,
Mm-hmm.
sending out passenger messages,
Right.
relaying news,
Yeah.
and of course, sending those vital distress calls.
But as we know, those distress calls
Yeah.
weren't always received
Right.
or acted upon promptly.
Right.
So going back to those ice warnings,
Here.
what were some of the specific reasons why they weren't given more attention?
Well, overconfidence certainly played a role.
Okay.
The belief in the Titanic's unsinkability created a culture of complacency,
Right.
leading some to dismiss the warnings as insignificant.
But there must have been other factors at play too, right?
Yeah, there were also practical considerations.
Okay.
The wireless operators were often overwhelmed with passenger messages.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Wow.
Which were given priority as they generated revenue for the company.
Oh, I see.
And some messages weren't relayed to the bridge immediately.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
They got lost in the chain of command.
It's incredible how a combination of human error, technological limitations, and social hierarchies contributed to this tragedy.
It's a perfect storm of unfortunate circumstances.
So the Titanic is steaming ahead. Those warnings not fully heeded, and the lookouts are scanning the icy waters from the crow's nest.
Yes.
We know they didn't have binoculars that night.
Right.
But what other challenges did they face in spotting icebergs?
Well, imagine yourself up in that crow's nest.
Okay.
Freezing cold.
Yeah.
The wind whipping across your face.
Yeah.
The vast darkness of the North Atlantic stretching out before you.
That sounds terrifying.
It was a very challenging job.
Yeah.
Visibility was limited.
Yeah.
And they were relying solely on their eyesight
Wow.
to spot potential hazards.
And to add to the challenge, I read that the lookouts didn't even have access to the key for the locker.
You're right.
Containing the binoculars.
Yes, that's another detail that adds to the tragedy.
Really?
The binoculars were stored in a locker on board. But due to a last-minute crew change, the key was left behind in Southampton.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
It's a seemingly minor oversight.
Yeah, it is.
But it just highlights how a series of small events can have a cascading effect.
Yeah.
Ultimately leading to a major catastrophe.
Exactly, a chain reaction of unfortunate events.
So it's almost unfathomable how a missing key could have such a significant impact.
Yeah, but that's often the case.
Right.
Small things can have big consequences.
Yeah.
Especially in a situation like this.
But let's go back to that moment.
Okay.
The lookouts scanning the darkness.
Right.
They finally spot the iceberg.
Yeah.
But it's too late. What happens next?
So picture this. It's around 11:40 p.m. on April 14th.
Okay.
A starlit night. The sea is calm.
Okay.
The lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, are straining their eyes, searching for any sign of danger.
Right.
Suddenly, Fleet spots something looming out of the darkness.
Oh, gosh.
"Iceberg right ahead," he shouts, frantically ringing the warning bell.
Chills just ran down my spine.
Yeah, it's a chilling moment.
Imagining that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they sound the alarm, but the ship is moving at a considerable speed.
Right. It was going pretty fast.
Was there any way to avoid the collision at that point?
That's what I want to know.
So the Titanic was traveling at over 20 knots, which was considered a high speed for those waters, especially given the ice warnings.
Yeah.
First Officer Murdoch, who was on the bridge, immediately ordered the ship to turn hard to port. And engines full astern.
Okay, so they tried to stop.
They did.
Yeah.
But the Titanic, a massive ship with a large turning radius, couldn't maneuver quickly enough.
So even with their best efforts, they couldn't avoid the impact.
37 seconds after the lookout's warning.
Wow.
The Titanic struck the iceberg, scraping along its starboard side.
Oh my gosh.
The impact itself wasn't a jarring crash.
Really?
More of a grinding shudder. Some passengers felt a slight tremor, others heard a scraping sound.
Wow.
But many didn't even realize the severity of what had happened.
I can't imagine the range of emotions on board at that moment.
Yeah, it must have been a mix of disbelief, confusion, and a strange sense of calm.
Wow.
Some passengers went up on deck to see what had happened, even playing with pieces of ice that had fallen onto the deck.
Wow, some were oblivious.
Yeah, completely oblivious.
Wow.
Below-deck crew members rushed to assess the damage.
Okay.
It quickly became clear that this wasn't a minor scrape.
Right.
Water was pouring into several of the forward compartments.
So this is the moment when that unsinkable myth starts to crumble.
Yeah, the reality sets in.
What were the key decisions made?
Sure.
In those crucial moments after the collision?
Captain Smith was summoned to the bridge.
Okay.
And the ship's designer, Thomas Andrews, was called upon to assess the damage.
Okay.
Andrews, who knew the ship intimately, quickly determined that the situation was dire.
Yeah.
The iceberg had breached several of the watertight compartments.
Right.
And the ship was taking on water rapidly.
I'm struck by the weight of that realization.
It's a heavy burden.
Yeah.
The man who designed this marvel of engineering, who believed so strongly in its safety, now has to confront its imminent demise.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah, it is.
What do they do next?
With a heavy heart, Andrews informed Captain Smith that the Titanic was doomed.
Oh, wow.
The order was given to uncover the lifeboats and prepare for evacuation.
Okay.
Wireless operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride began sending out distress calls using the newly adopted SOS signal.
Oh, wow.
And as the reality of the situation set in,
a
sense of panic and urgency gripped the ship.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Titanic. We've explored the ship's creation, the fateful events leading to its sinking, and the harrowing experiences of those on board. But now we kind of shift our focus to the aftermath, a time of immense grief, I imagine, and soul-searching.
Yeah.
And a global reckoning with maritime safety standards.
Absolutely.
The world was in shock. I mean...
Yeah, in shock and disbelief.
This unsinkable symbol of human progress now resting at the bottom of the ocean. It kind of forced everyone to confront some uncomfortable truths about our own limitations.
Yeah, it really exposed the hubris of the time.
Yeah.
The belief that technology could conquer nature.
Right.
The sinking of the Titanic was a global event.
Yeah.
Instantly making headlines and sparking a wave of investigations and inquiries on both sides of the Atlantic.
Right.
The magnitude of the loss, over 1,500 lives.
Just unbelievable.
It demanded answers.
Of course.
The world wanted to know what went wrong, who was responsible, and how such a tragedy could have been prevented.
I mean, it wasn't just about assigning blame, though. Right. It was about understanding the systemic failures.
Absolutely.
The human errors, the technological limitations that all contributed to this disaster.
Yeah, it was a combination of factors.
Yeah, what were some of the key questions that the investigators were trying to answer?
Well, the investigations focused on several key areas.
Right.
They examined the speed at which the Titanic was traveling in known icy waters, scrutinizing the decisions made by Captain Smith and the pressure he might have felt to maintain the schedule and uphold the ship's reputation for speed.
Yeah.
They also delved into the lack of sufficient lifeboats, questioning why a ship of that size carrying so many passengers was allowed to set sail with so few life-saving vessels.
It seems like every aspect of the Titanic's operation, from its design to its communication protocols, was under scrutiny.
It was a thorough investigation.
Yeah. What were some of the most significant findings that emerged?
Well, one major finding was that the Titanic was indeed traveling at a high speed. Despite receiving multiple ice warnings, this decision, ultimately made by Captain Smith, reflected a culture of overconfidence and a belief that the ship could handle any challenge. The inquiries also revealed that the lack of binoculars for the lookouts played a role in their delayed spotting of the iceberg.
It's a detail that seems almost trivial.
It does.
But it highlights how a seemingly minor oversight can have catastrophic consequences.
Exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned the lack of lifeboats earlier.
Right.
And it's something I keep coming back to.
I understand.
How could a ship that grand, designed to carry thousands of passengers, be allowed to set sail with lifeboats for only about half the people on board?
Right.
Were there no regulations in place to prevent this?
There were regulations.
Okay.
But as we discussed earlier, they were based on ship tonnage, not passenger capacity.
Right.
This meant that a ship like the Titanic, while technically meeting the regulations of the time, was woefully unprepared for a disaster of this scale.
Right.
The investigations really exposed the inadequacy of these regulations, highlighting the urgent need for reform.
So it's a sobering reminder that sometimes even following the rules can lead to devastating outcomes if the rules themselves are outdated or flawed.
It's a tragic lesson.
Did the investigations uncover any other factors that contributed to the tragedy?
Yes. They also revealed significant communication breakdowns, both within the ship's hierarchy and between the Titanic and other vessels. Remember, wireless communication was still a relatively new technology. And there were no standardized protocols for handling distress calls or relaying critical information. The Californians' failure to respond to the Titanic's distress signals, partly due to their wireless operator being off duty, underscored the need for 24-hour wireless monitoring on passenger ships.
So the Titanic sinking wasn't just a tragic accident.
No.
It was a catalyst for some major changes in maritime safety regulations.
Absolutely.
What were some of the most impactful reforms that came about as a result of this disaster?
The Titanic's legacy is profound, particularly in the realm of maritime safety. The investigations led to the establishment of the International Convention for the Safety of Life at Sea, or SOLAS. This convention set new standards for lifeboat capacity, mandating that all passenger ships must carry enough lifeboats for everyone on board.
So no more percentages or calculations based on tonnage.
Exactly.
It had to be enough for every single soul on the ship.
Every single person.
Yeah, that's a crucial change.
It was a game changer.
Addressing one of the most glaring failures in the Titanic's case.
Yes.
Were there any other significant reforms implemented as a result of SOLAS?
Absolutely. SOLAS also mandated the establishment of the International Ice Patrol, an organization dedicated to monitoring iceberg activity in the North Atlantic and providing timely warnings to ships.
So that was a direct response to the Titanic?
Yes.
Wow.
This combined with the requirement for 24-hour wireless operation on passenger ships aimed to prevent the communication breakdowns that had contributed to the Titanic's fate.
It's remarkable.
It is.
How this one event led to such sweeping changes in the maritime industry.
It really did revolutionize maritime safety.
It's a bittersweet legacy, but one that undoubtedly saved countless lives in the years to come.
I agree.
Did the Titanic sinking impact ship design as well?
Yes. The Titanic sinking led to significant changes in ship design.
In what ways?
So double-hulled ships became the norm, offering an extra layer of protection against hull breaches. The placement and accessibility of lifeboats were also reevaluated, with ships now required to have enough lifeboats on each side of the vessel to accommodate all passengers and crew. And of course, advancements in communication technology, including the standardization of distress signals and the development of sonar and radar, further enhanced maritime safety.
So the Titanic, despite its tragic end, ultimately led to a safer, more regulated and technologically advanced maritime industry.
Precisely.
But beyond the practical changes, what about the cultural impact? I mean, the Titanic has captivated people's imaginations for over a century. Yeah, it has.
Why do you think this story continues to resonate so strongly with us?
Well, I think the Titanic story is a complex tapestry of human ambition, technological innovation, social divisions, and ultimately our vulnerability in the face of nature's power. It's a tale that speaks to our fascination with disaster, our fear of the unknown, and our enduring hope for survival.
I think it's those human stories.
Yes.
You know, those acts of courage and self-sacrifice that make this tragedy so poignant.
Absolutely.
You know, the musicians playing as the ship sank. The passengers giving up their seats on lifeboats for others. The families separated in the chaos.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. These stories stay with us.
Yeah, they do.
Long after we've heard the facts and the figures.
The Titanic has become more than just a shipwreck. It's a symbol, a reminder of our own mortality. The importance of humility in the face of forces beyond our control.
It really is. And perhaps that's why we keep coming back to this story, seeking answers, finding solace in the acts of heroism. And reflecting on the lessons learned from this monumental tragedy.
As we wrap up our deep dive, I'm left with a sense of gratitude for the sacrifices made. And the lessons learned.
Absolutely.
The Titanic story reminds us that progress isn't always linear.
It's not a straight line.
That even our greatest achievements can be humbled by nature's power. And that ultimately it's the human spirit and all its complexity and resilience that endures.
It does.
Well, thank you for joining us on this journey of exploration and reflection.
It's been my pleasure.
We hope you've gained a deeper understanding. Of not just the events surrounding the Titanic sinking, but also its lasting impact on our world.
It's a story that continues to fascinate.
And for you, our listener, we hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity to learn more, to seek out the individual stories of those who were on board that fateful night, and to reflect on what this tragedy can teach us about ourselves and our place in the world.
It's a story that has something to teach all of us.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.